Hey guys, happy Friday. Thanks for tuning in today. Gonna do something a little bit different since Georgia is doing essentially absolutely nothing on the recruiting trail, which I've taken a lot of flack for saying, but it's true. We haven't had a recruit commit in over a month. We've only had two commits in the last 75 to 80 days, somewhere right in there. So, I mean, we're going on 3 months with two commits and a lot of big names still floating out there that we expected to be committed right now. But nevertheless, not what I'm here to talk about today. I wanted to do something a little bit different and give my thoughts on Georgia's potential in the 2020 football season and what our schedule might look like. So I'm going to throw the schedule up somewhere in here so you can kind of follow along with me. Going to go game by game, give you my thoughts on each game, overall record, and you can argue with me and tell me I'm a Georgia homer, or you can tell me I'm an idiot because I'm not going to pick Georgia to go 12-0. Either way, because I'm not. So we'll start off week 1, neutral site game against Virginia. It's going to be an easy win, guys. Bryce Perkins is gone. He was essentially the reason that Virginia was even decent last year. He was their only offensive firepower, really, that they had. Their defense is not very good. This will not be a very close game, even though Georgia doesn't necessarily know who the quarterback is going to be, or assuming it's going to be Newman, how he's going to play with the new offense and the new coordinator and chemistry and everything else. It really is not going to matter. This game is not going to be very close. Georgia's 1-0. We come home and face something called an East Tennessee State Buccaneer. Georgia wins by as much as they want to. Will not be a close game at all. Probably a 40, 50 point win, I would guess. But week 3, that's the big one, guys. Tuscaloosa. Playing Alabama at Alabama. And, this one it's really up in the air. But as of right now, today, June 26th, I have to give the edge to Alabama. I just do. They return a ton of experience on both sides of the ball. I know that they lost, Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs and obviously Tua, but Mac Jones played a lot, obviously, last year. He played the last several games of the season. He knows the offense. He has chemistry with those players. They return Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith, which are arguably two of the best wide receivers in the country. They return Najee Harris, arguably one of the best running backs in the country. Georgia at this point is going to still be figuring out the offense. Who's going to be quarterback? How does our offense look? The chemistry with the receivers. How is Zamir White doing, going from essentially third or fourth string after his torn ACL 2 years ago, third or fourth string last year, to now all of a sudden being the feature back? And, how does James Cook step up and kind of be that number 2 guy, if he is that number 2 guy? So again, I don't see it happening. I really don't. I think we drop this game to Alabama right now. I'll get back to that later, but I think after this game, Georgia's sitting at 2-1, where we come home and face Louisiana Monroe. Another, just like the East Tennessee State game, it's not going to be a game. Georgia will win by 40, 50 points. Will not be close. We follow that up with another easy game. This one, though, is in conference against Vandy at home. Another easy win. Not going to be a close game. So at this point, Georgia's sitting at 4-1? Big game after Vandy. Auburn at home. Luckily, it's at home. Gus Malzahn can't figure out a way to beat Georgia in Athens, which is good news for us. This is not going to be an easy game. Auburn will be a good team, even though they lost basically their entire defensive line and several other key players on defense. Their offense will be very good. This is going to be a close game. And I will tell you right now, if Georgia loses this game to Auburn, that's it. The season's over at that point. If we can't beat Auburn at home, we're not going to beat Florida. And basically all hopes of really anything at all, even winning the SEC East, are gone at that point. If we lose to Alabama week 3, we have to beat Auburn. No choice. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Well, if we lose, no. Nope. We have to beat Auburn. Then we come in, go to Missouri, play them in week 7. Missouri will not be a good team. Probably will be fighting over Vandy for the worst team in the SEC East. Even though it's at Missouri, Georgia wins that game by 30 plus points. Then we get a bye week, which is always good before the Florida game, where we face Florida in Jacksonville. What do I have us sitting at? 7-1 at this point. 7-1? Yeah, 7-1. The gap between Georgia and Florida is still significant. You can say Kyle Trask is the best quarterback, returning in the SEC if you want to say that. But Florida's offensive line was terrible most of last year. They're not going to be good this year either. Florida hasn't had a relevant running game in years. Their leading rusher last year had 600 some yards. They have not had a legitimate running back or running game at all in years. Kyle Trask is not a mobile quarterback. He had like negative 200 rushing yards or something ridiculous last year. But their defense is going to be good. So this is not going to be an easy game. It's going to be very similar to last year. Probably going to come down to one possession, and the team that steps up on those last 3-4 minutes of the game will win this game. I think that Georgia does win this game again to send us to 8-1, where then we have to travel to Columbia, South Carolina, to play the Gamecocks. South Carolina is South Carolina. We lost to them last year in a fluke game. One of the most, and I'm not just saying this as a Georgia fan, the Georgia-South Carolina game last year was one of the flukiest college football games I've ever seen in my life. And, again, I'm not just saying that because we lost. That game was a fluke beyond all flukes. South Carolina's offense scored 1 touchdown, and Georgia lost that game. South Carolina's defensive back had 3 circus interceptions. I'm not these weren't interceptions that were thrown straight to him and he caught him in the chest. Go back and look at that game. He made 3 circus interceptions against Georgia. 3 of them. One, he was diving away from the ball. One, he went up and pinpointed it that was, 6 feet over his head. One got tipped by Tyler Simmons, and he was falling to the ground and caught it behind. It was just, plus Jake Fromm fumbled. He had 4 turnovers. It was the weirdest, flukiest game I've ever seen. It doesn't happen this year. Georgia wins very easily against South Carolina, probably somewhere in the 20 to 30 point range. Not going to be a close game. The team that has had a lot of hype over the last month or two just because of their, quantity of recruits that they've been pulling in, we come back home to play Tennessee. Might be a good game. It honestly might be a good game. Tennessee's not there yet. they're still a roster loaded with 3 stars. They might be a little bit better on defense. They might be a little bit better on offense. But Georgia still wins this game fairly comfortably. It's not going to be a 30-point blowout like it has been for the last 3 years. It's going to be a closer game. It's going to be probably somewhere in the ballpark of 14 to 20 points. I could see like a 31-17, 28-14 type game here. Georgia wins by a couple scores. Then we go to Lexington and play Kentucky. Not going to be a close game, guys. The talent gap between Georgia and the rest of these teams in the SEC East is so huge. You've got Georgia, and then Florida is a little bit behind Georgia as far as the talent gap goes. But then you've got everybody else that are not even close. Kentucky, South Carolina, Missouri, Vandy, they are not in the same zip code as Georgia and Florida when it comes to recruiting, level of recruits, talent, depth, anything of that nature. This game will not be close, even though it's in Lexington. Georgia wins by 3 or 4 scores. And at that point, we're sitting at 10-1 before we play the last game of the season at home against Georgia Tech. We beat them by like 50 last year. We'll beat them by 50 again. Georgia goes 11-1 in the regular season. But Georgia could go 12-0. If Georgia wins in week 3 in Tuscaloosa, they are not losing another game. I can tell you that with confidence. If Georgia beats Alabama in Tuscaloosa week 3, it's over. Georgia will not lose another game the rest of the year. If Georgia loses to Alabama, they could slip up against Auburn. They could slip up against Florida. At worst, we're looking at 9-3, which would obviously be a very disappointing season in terms of, what's expected at UGA. 10-2 is definitely possible, dropping a game to Alabama and Florida, or Alabama and Auburn, or potentially even Auburn and Florida. But again, if we beat Alabama, that ain't happening. In all honesty, it's really up in the air. 12-0, 11-1, 10-2. Those are all real possibilities. I think UGA goes 11-1. We face Alabama in the SEC championship game, but at this point in the season, UGA has figured out their offense. Jamie Newman is rolling. He has chemistry with the wide receivers. The offense is working. Georgia's putting up 40-plus points every game, and that is when we trip up Alabama. So, 11-1, we lose to Alabama in week 3. However, we get revenge in the SEC championship game. We beat Alabama to win the SEC, punch our ticket to the playoff, and we'll see what happens there. Might do a couple other teams. We'll see. Just wanted to get this one out of the way. Hopefully we have a season, guys. It's still up in the air. Who knows what's going to happen. But if UGA has a football season for 2020, I think we go 11-1, win the SEC to be 12-1, and punch our ticket to the playoff. Hope you guys have a good weekend. Stay safe. We'll talk to you soon.